Alright, this is going to be a pretty short video because I've touched on the value true and false and what that Boolean is and how it works in conditions. And let's break it down and dig a little bit deeper. Okay. Now, we talked about before the difference between false, which is a Boolean value, and the word false. Okay. They're not the same. That's the keyword false. This is not. Okay. So Boolean false. False is equivalent to a 0. The computer thinks of it as 0. So the Boolean 0 or 1. 0 is the false, 1 is the true. The word null, or the value null, means none, or there's nothing there. 0 is an integer. 0.0 is a float. They're not the same. An empty string is different than nothing or none. Okay. An empty list, meaning a list with nothing in it. An empty tuple, parentheses, there's nothing in it. An empty dictionary, there's nothing there. An empty set. So if we're doing some comparison, okay, some comparison, check to see if some list, oh, wait a minute, some list has a value, and that value is an empty set. Is there something there or not? What do you think is going to happen if we do the conditional for some list? Is it going to come up as a true or a false? Hey, it's empty. Some list doesn't have anything in it. It's empty. If that list had value, hey, there's something there. So with that logic, had that been assigned the empty tuple value, just one open parentheses and close parentheses, false. There's nothing in that tuple. There's nothing in that dictionary. Nothing in that set. Nothing in that string. That float, there's nothing there. It's just a 0. This one's a little sketchy and maybe hard to wrap your head around. If it was a 1, oh, there's an actual number there. There's some value there. 0.0 is value, but for this context, it would return false. If the value of the integer was 0, it would return false. If null had a value of none, return false. Boolean, false. Okay. Anything other than those would be returned as true. So, if color is equivalent to red, it would have to be the exact same as red. Uppercase R, little e, little d, not the same. So this gets kind of sketchy because color is a string. We're comparing each one of those characters in that string, and they all three or all of them would have to be identical. Okay. If color had the value of mauve, which it did in our previous example, it would be true. Well, in this example, and we saw it above in the switch statement, come back up, we're comparing one string with another. One string with another. Okay. So each character in that string has to be identical for them to be equivalent or the same. And if they are equivalent, that condition's met. The condition is true. If they are not identical, condition is false. So, I talked about it before, the multiple comparisons, and we'll dig into it a little bit more now. Or. We can also use and. As I said, in some languages, it's not the word or, not the and or, but we have a symbol, a comparison symbol. Okay. Now, that's multiple comparisons. This or this one or this one. Any one of them and you're good. And all of them, if you used and, all of them would have to be met for it to be true. Are you limited to how many conditions you can have? No. It just gets ugly the more you have. Now, beyond the or and the and for multiple conditions or multiple comparisons, and they're not just comparisons, the operators that we have in there, I showed those. We'll look at each one of these. I prefer to wrap them in parentheses as a specific condition. If this condition is true, or this condition is true, or this condition is true. New line, keep going with the conditions. That's the end of that conditional statement. The next thing we're going to look at is if something is in. Now, in how? Are we talking about a string of characters? If this is in this string, and strings we're going to talk about in the next module, but for this, here's a string of characters called vowels, A-E-I-O-U. And we've got another single character, even though it's treated, we'll look at it as a string of characters, it's just the one character. If letter is in vowels, that's a condition. Letter in vowels. This is implicit. We're just doing away with the if. This is explicit. Letter in vowels, we didn't have any kind of result if it was true. We just said, what is it? Is that condition true? Does that have, what is that value there? Yes. Letter, whatever's in letter, happens to be in vowels. If letter in vowels, if that condition is met, if that's a true statement, boom, do this. Else, print letter is not a vowel. So what if, the way this is written, What if letter was F and we executed this code? What outputs would we have? False. The way it's written, nothing. Had we put an else in there, we could have said letter is not a vowel. Okay. So that's how the in works. It checks to see if something is in something else. Is it in a tuple? Is it in a set? Is it in a dict? Is it in a string? Okay. So we can check to see if it's in something else, if it's in a list. Now, if it's in a float, you know. If it's in an integer, no, those won't work. We'll say if it's in some structure that has multiple values within it. And those multiple values we'll talk about in another module, like in module 5 for text strings, or it could be in another course, say COP3530, with data structures and how do those structures work. Okay. Now, going through this, we talked about in, we talked about multiple comparisons. I talked about we weren't limited to just strings. It could be a tuple, it could be a dict, it could be a string, it could anything that holds more than one. And in the next lecture, we'll come back and we'll talk about something new to Python. I am the walrus. What is the walrus? And I'll see you there.